The air on Xylos 7, the designated moon for the rite of Cathar, was thick with the scent of pollen and decay. It smelled of life and its inevitable conclusion, a fitting perfume for the great hunt. Xylos of the third clutch stood on a ridge of black, volcanic rock, his four arms crossed over his carapaced chest. Below, a jungle of phosphorescent fungi and drooping, moss-laden trees unfurled like a living tapestry. Two of his hands rested on the cool metal of his hunting gauntlet. The other two held a pair of multi-spectrum scanners. He was a creature of elegant lethality, nearly 3 meters tall, with obsidian chitin, mandibles that could shear through plasteel, and eyes that saw in wavelengths of heat and radiation unknown to most species. Today he was to become a true Cathar. He was to become a hunter. The rite was tradition, etched into the very soul of his people. A young Cathar, upon reaching maturity, was sent to a preserve with a single task: to select a quarry from the Galactic Concordance's approved list, hunt it, and return with a trophy. It was a test of skill, patience, and spirit. It was the foundation of their society, a constant reminder of their place at the apex of the known galactic food chain. Xylos scanned the list of available prey on the preserve. There was the skittering hex-crawler from Cygnus X1, a notoriously difficult quarry known for its speed and venom. Too messy. A brachiating grok from the Andromeda Nebulae, powerful and territorial. Too much brute force required, not enough finesse. Xylos wanted a classic hunt, a battle of wits, a testament to pure, unadulterated predatory instinct. His gaze fell upon entry 112, Terran, Homo sapiens. The database entry was almost insulting in its simplicity classification. Class 4 prey physiology, bipedal, endoskeletal, soft-skinned. Extremely vulnerable to kinetic and energy-based traumasensory organs. Limited visual spectrum. Poor olfactory and auditory senses compared to galactic baseline natural defenses. None. No claws, no fangs of significance, no natural armor. Psychological profile, prone to panic. Displays herd behavior under stress. High intelligence noted but primarily geared toward tool use, not evasion or combat. Recommended capture method: simple auditory or visual disorientation followed by kinetic net. A smile creased Xylos's mandibles. Perfect, a thinking prey, but a fragile one. A creature that relied on its intellect, which meant outsmarting it would be a true display of Cathar superiority. This was the elegant hunt he craved. The database indicated a single Terran had registered for a solo ecotourism permit on Xylos 7. A backpacker. The audacity was almost amusing. A prey species willingly wandering into a predator's larder. It took him less than a rotation to locate the heat signature. It was pathetic, a faint bloom of warmth huddled near a stream at the base of the ridge. Through his scanners, Xylos watched the human. It was male, of average height for its species, and was currently struggling with a brightly colored sheet of synthetic fabric and several thin poles. A primitive shelter. The creature hummed a tuneless, discordant melody and occasionally spoke to itself. The red pole goes in the blue grommet, or was it the other way around? The instructions were in a language that looked like someone spilled spaghetti on a keyboard. Helpful. Lowered his scanners, a feeling of supreme confidence washing over him. The creature was distracted, clumsy, and audibly broadcasting its location. This was almost too easy. His ancestors would watch from the spirit realm with pride. He would give the human the night to settle in. A true hunter savored the anticipation. He would let the prey feel a moment of false security before the reality of the galaxy descended upon it. The moon's twin, a larger gas giant, rose over the horizon, casting the jungle in hues of violet and silver. Xylos settled into a meditative trance, his mind focused, his body a coiled spring of potential energy. The hunt would begin at first light. The first light painted the sky in shades of sickly green, a common phenomenon in the Xylos system. Xylos descended from his perch with the silence of a falling shadow. He approached the human's camp, his 4 feet making no sound on the damp soil. The Terran was asleep, his soft breaths fogging the cool morning air. A thin line of drool connected his cheek to a small inflatable pillow. Pathetic, Xylos decided on a classic opening gambit. The oral disorienter. a small device that emitted a multi-frequency sonic pulse designed to induce vertigo and nausea in most carbon-based life forms. It was non-lethal, meant to cripple and confuse, allowing for a clean and effortless capture. He placed the small, disc-shaped device on a branch overlooking the tent and retreated to a safe distance, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. He activated it, the air shimmered with an inaudible shriek. Inside the tent, the human Leo shot upright. Og, what in the name of it's like 1,000 tiny dentists drilling in my skull at once, he yelled, clutching his head. He stumbled out of the tent, looking wildly around. He wasn't panicking, not in the way the database described. His face was screwed up in a look of profound annoyance, not terror. Seriously, he shouted to the jungle at large. Intergalactic tinnitus. Is that a thing now? I paid good credits for this trip. I expected pristine wilderness, not a rave for ghosts. Xylos watched, perplexed. The disorientation should have had the human on his knees, vomiting. Instead, the Terran was rummaging through his ridiculously oversized backpack. He pulled out 2 small, bright orange foam objects and shoved them into his ears. There, Leo said, his voice now slightly muffled. Better. Now where is that infernal noise coming from? He began to pace, his head tilted. He was using a process of elimination, moving left, then right, his expression one of intense concentration. It took him less than 3 minutes to pinpoint the branch where Xylos had placed the device. He squinted. Well, hello there, little piece of overpriced, misery-inducing tech, he muttered. He pulled a multi-tool from his pocket, a device that seemed to contain an absurd number of tiny gadgets, and with surprising dexterity, pried open the disorienter's casing. A snip of 2 wires and silence fell. Xylos was stunned. It had to be luck, a random guess. No prey species should be able to so calmly diagnose and disable Cathar hunting equipment. He scowled. Fine. The subtle approach had failed. Time for something more direct. He moved ahead of the Terran's likely path, deeper into the jungle. He found a narrow game trail flanked by thick, grasping vines. Here, he set his second trap. A kinetic net launcher, triggered by a pressure plate concealed beneath a layer of leaves. Simple, effective, and inescapable for a soft-skinned biped. He settled into the canopy to watch. An hour later, Leo came strolling down the path, whistling the same dreadful tune from the day before. He was using a long, sturdy branch as a walking stick. As he approached the spot, he slowed down. He poked the ground in front of him with the stick. Once, twice. Then he poked the exact center of the pressure plate. F-whoosh. A weighted net, woven from high-tensile metallic fibers, erupted from the ground and soared into the air, landing in a useless heap 20 feet down the trail. Leo stared at the pile of soil he had disturbed. He looked at the net. He looked up into the trees. You know, he called out, his voice echoing slightly, for a supposedly advanced predator species, your trap placement is a little obvious. I mean the freshly disturbed earth. That's page 1 in the How Not to Get Eaten handbook, which for the record I wrote a very popular blog series about. Felt a hot surge of fury. The prey was mocking him. Mocking him. This was unheard of. The database had been catastrophically wrong. This creature wasn't panicking. It was critiquing. He decided then and there to abandon all pretense of subtlety. He dropped from the canopy, landing on the path with a heavy thud that cracked the earth. He stood to his full, intimidating height, spreading all 4 arms wide. His mandibles flared in a display of primal aggression that had sent lesser creatures into cardiac arrest. Leo just looked him up and down, one eyebrow raised. "Oh, good," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "The welcoming committee. Let me guess, you're the one who's been leaving all the party favors around. Look, pal, I appreciate the effort, I really do. The whole silent stalker in the trees vibe is very classic. A bit derivative of some horror movies from my planet, but hey, art inspires art." Took a menacing step forward. His hunting instincts screamed at him to lunge, to end this farce. "But," Leo continued, holding up a hand, "I'm on a very tight schedule. I've got see the Singing Caverns at noon and get mildly poisoned by a luminescent puffer frog, penciled in for 3. So if we could just skip the whole chase scene, that would be great. My cardio isn't what it used to be." Let out a guttural roar, a sound that shook the very leaves on the trees. Leo winced. Okay, inside voice, I get it. You're committed to the bit. Fine. We'll do the chase. He pointed down the path. You want me to run that way, or is there a more photogenic route you'd prefer? Maybe past that waterfall over there. It would make for a great action shot. Xylos could process the sheer absurdity of the conversation. Leo turned and broke into a surprisingly brisk jog, heading directly away from the waterfall. Catch me if you can, big guy, he yelled over his shoulder. Try not to trip. With a snarl of pure, unadulterated frustration, Xylos gave chase. The great hunt had officially devolved into a complete and utter mess. The prey was not only unafraid, it was an incessant, sarcastic talker. Xylos's pride was beginning to feel a sharp, unfamiliar sting, a sensation far more irritating than any physical wound. He was the hunter. He was. But as he pounded through the alien jungle, the sound of Leo's cheerful, infuriating whistling echoing ahead of him, a tiny, poisonous seed of doubt began to sprout in his mind. The chase stretched on for hours, a grueling tour of Xylos 7's most inconvenient terrain. The human Leo was a paradox. His physical endurance was, as predicted, mediocre. He'd get winded easily, stopping to lean against a tree and gasp for air, but his resourcefulness was infuriating. He used the environment with a native's cunning. He'd lead Xylos into thickets of razor-edged grass that snagged and scraped at his chitinous plates, then slip through a gap too narrow for the Cathar's broad shoulders. He crossed a chasm by felling a half-rotted log, which promptly collapsed the moment Xylos set foot on it, forcing the hunter into a long, humiliating detour. And through it all, he never ever shut up. You're gaining on me, he'd shout, his voice echoing back. Or maybe I'm slowing down, it's hard to tell. This humidity is a nightmare for my hair. Later, as Xylos navigated a bog of thick, bubbling mud, Leo called from the far side, where he was calmly cleaning his boots with a handful of leaves. Pro tip: the green bubbles are mostly methane, but the purple ones have a colony of flesh-eating microbes. You might want to aim for the green ones. Just a friendly suggestion from one traveler to another. Xylos felt his finely honed predatory focus fraying, replaced by a white-hot, grinding annoyance. This wasn't a hunt. It was a guided tour through hell, narrated by the galaxy's most irritating tour guide. He tried to tune it out to focus on the primal rhythm of the chase, but Leo's voice was a persistent insect buzzing just inside his auditory senses. By the second rotation, Xylos was exhausted and his confidence was in tatters. He had failed to capture the prey with 2 different traps and a direct pursuit. He retreated to a high-ground observation point to regroup, and more importantly, to escape the sound of Leo's voice. He activated the long-range comm unit in his gauntlet, a secure channel to his mentor, Kalen of the First Clutch. Kalen's holographic image flickered to life. He was ancient, his carapace scarred and pitted from 1,000 hunts. His eyes, even in holographic form, were sharp and judgmental. Xylos, Kalen's voice rasped, a sound like stones grinding together. You are 2 rotations into the right. I expected your signal of success by now. Report, hesitated. How could he explain this? Mentor Kalen, I have encountered difficulties with the chosen quarry. Kalen's mandibles clicked in disapproval. You chose the Terran, Class 4 prey. What difficulties could there be? Did you slip and injure a limb? No, Mentor. The prey, it is not behaving as the data suggests. It avoids my traps. It uses the terrain to its advantage. It seems unconcerned. Let out a low rumble, the Cathar equivalent of a sigh. Xylos, this is a common trial for a young hunter. The prey's fear manifests in unpredictable ways. This unconcerned behavior you describe is a classic sign of deep, paralyzing terror. It has lost its higher reasoning. It is merely a bundle of panicked instincts. You are letting it get into your head. A fatal flaw for a hunter. Be patient. Observe its patterns. Set a trap it cannot possibly anticipate. Let its own fear be its undoing. Mentor, it talks to me. It mocks my technique. The hologram of Kalen went still for a long moment. It communicates incessantly, Xylos admitted, the word tasting like ash. A sign of madness, Kalen concluded firmly. The prey's mind has broken, an easy target. Do not let its meaningless sounds distract you. Show it the silence of the Cathar. In this, Xylos, your clutch awaits your triumphant return. The hologram vanished, leaving Xylos alone with his swirling doubts. Kalen's words should have been reassuring, but they felt hollow. He had seen the look in the Terran's eyes. It wasn't madness. It was an unnerving, calculating intelligence wrapped in a layer of pure, weaponized annoyance. Heeding his mentor's advice, however, he resolved to craft the perfect trap. He spent the next several hours constructing a deadfall, a masterpiece of natural engineering. He used a massive, stone-heavy log, suspending it over a narrow pass with a network of vines connected to a single, hair-thin tripwire. The mechanism was flawless, the placement impeccable. No creature, no matter how clever, could spot the wire against the jungle floor. He settled in to wait, his predatory calm slowly returning. This time there would be no escape. Hours later, Leo came wandering into the pass. He was, for once, silent, examining a brilliantly colored flower. He approached the tripwire. Xylos tensed, all four hands ready to release the secondary locks if needed. Leo's foot lifted. It hovered directly over the wire, then he stopped. He looked down, not at the wire, but at his own feet. He shook his head. "Nope," he said to himself. "Forgot my water bottle back at the stream, can't have that. Dehydration is the silent killer." He turned around and walked back out of the pass, whistling that same soul-grating tune. Xylos wanted to scream. He wanted to leap down and tear the jungle apart with his bare hands. The sheer, infuriating luck of the creature was beyond comprehension. He waited, fuming, for the Terran to return. And he waited, and waited. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in lurid shades of orange, Xylos realized Leo wasn't coming back. He had been tricked. The prey had spotted the trap, known Xylos was watching, and had performed that little monologue for his benefit. Defeated and seething, Xylos returned to his own observation perch, a small cave high on the cliff face that afforded him a commanding view of the area. As he entered the cave, he noticed something was wrong. The air smelled different. Sweet. Sticky. His advanced optical scanners, his multi-spectrum binoculars that had cost more than a small star freighter, were sitting on a rock ledge. They were completely covered in a thick, purple, gooey substance that smelled vaguely of fermented fruit. And stuck to the top, held in place by the goo, was a large, flat leaf. Scrawled on it in charcoal was a message in clumsy but legible Cathar script. "Clean your lenses. You might miss something important. P.S. The view from here is great." Xylos stared at the desecrated equipment. He looked at the note. He felt something inside him snap. This was no longer a hunt. It wasn't a test or a rite of passage. It was a personal vendetta. But the most unsettling part was the growing, terrifying feeling that the vendetta was not his own. He spent a sleepless night, his mind racing. He kept replaying every encounter, every word the human had spoken. The critiques of his hunting technique, the warnings about the bog, the feigned incompetence followed by moments of brilliant evasion. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. Kalen had told him to observe the prey's patterns, and he finally was. But the pattern wasn't one of fear. It was one of control. His anxiety began to manifest physically. His mandibles would click uncontrollably. The tips of his four claws would twitch. He started at every jungle sound, imagining it was Leo, creeping up on him, ready to what? Tell another bad joke. Leave a sarcastic note on his sleeping roll. The psychological toll was immense. He was a Cathar, a hunter. His entire being was built for stalking, for patience, for the final, decisive strike. But how do you hunt a creature that refuses to act like prey? How do you stalk something that seems to know where you are at all times? How do you intimidate something that finds your most terrifying displays merely derivative? Driven by a new, desperate need for answers, Xylos abandoned the hunt. His mission was no longer to capture the Terran, but to understand it. He hunkered down in his cave and activated his Gauntlet's Deep Archive access to the Galactic Concordance database. He bypassed the simple Class 4 prey summary and delved into the restricted files, the appendices and footnotes that most species ignored. He pulled up obscure military reports first. A skirmish near the Kepler 186 system. A small Terran freighter listed as a civilian transport had been cornered by Vorlag pirates. The Vorlag were a nasty, brutish species, not tactically brilliant but overwhelmingly powerful. The report stated the Terran ship, facing certain destruction, had vented its primary coolant system, creating a super-chilled gas cloud that flash-froze the Vorlag's external weapon systems. Then they had launched their escape pods, not to flee but as projectiles, using their primitive chemical thrusters to breach the Vorlag's now brittle hull. The pirates had been found dead, not from weapons fire but from explosive decompression. Improvised, deceptive, utterly ruthless, another file. A diplomatic incident with the Cygnian trade hegemony. The Cygnians were masters of contract law and economic warfare, known for trapping entire civilizations in unbreakable trade agreements. A Terran ambassador, a female named Anya Sharma, had sat at the negotiation table for 3 weeks. The official transcript noted that she had won concessions the hegemony had never before granted. The addendum, written by a horrified Cygnian observer, was more illuminating. It described a Terran psychological tactic called bluffing, presenting a position of extreme strength with absolutely nothing to back it up, simply through sheer force of will and confidence. The observer noted, it was as if she was willing a reality into existence through pure audacity. We were negotiating with a ghost, and the ghost was winning. Felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was not the behavior of a herd animal. This was the behavior of something far more dangerous. Then he found it. The file was buried deep, flagged as speculative xenoanthropology and largely discredited. It was a study of the Terran homeworld, Earth. He read, his 4 eyes widening in horror. He read about their history, a relentless, unbroken chain of conflict. They didn't just hunt for food, they hunted each other. They had turned predation into a science, an art form. They had created weapons not just to kill but to inspire terror on a planetary scale. They had concepts like total war, guerrilla tactics, and psychological operations. The Great Hunt of the Cathar was a sacred ritual, a test of one hunter against one quarry. The Terrans had practiced the Great Hunt on a species-wide level, against themselves, for millennia. They had perfected it, and their relationship with other predators on their own world, it wasn't one of coexistence. It was one of total, absolute eradication. They didn't just avoid predators, they systematically hunted them to the brink of extinction, clearing the field until they were the undisputed masters of their entire biosphere. They weren't just apex predators, they were meta-predators. They preyed on other predators. The Galactic Concordance had made a catastrophic error. They had scanned a Terran body and seen soft skin, small teeth, and poor senses. They had measured the physical and dismissed the psychological. They had classified a shark as a minnow because it didn't have a visible dorsal fin. His gauntlet chimed. An incoming transmission. It was Kalen. Xylos accepted the call, his movements stiff. Xylos, his mentor's voice boomed. 4 rotations, this is becoming an embarrassment. Has the prey's madness finally consumed it? Have you secured the trophy? Xylos looked at his own trembling hands. Mentor, he began, his voice a strained whisper. Mentor, we were wrong, the database is wrong, all of it. You are overtired. Your mind is playing tricks on you. This is the final test of the hunt, boy, conquering your own doubt. Isn't doubt? Xylos shrieked, his voice cracking. It's data, I've read their history. They don't run from the hunt, they perfected it. They hunt predators for sport. Their entire civilization is built on a foundation of graduated, escalating violence. The creature down there, it isn't lost prey, it's an advanced scout. Was a long silence from Kalen's end. An advanced scout. Xylos, you sound hysterical. Your words are those of a frightened hatchling, not a Cathar hunter. What has this creature done to you? It's been teaching me, Xylos whispered, the awful truth finally coalescing in his mind. From the very beginning, the failed traps, the chase through the difficult terrain, the talking, it's a lesson. It's been showing me how a Terran hunts. Kalen's voice softened, but it was the softness of a medic speaking to a terminal patient. Xylos, son of my clutch brother. You must center yourself. Go now. Find this creature, end your obsession, fulfill the rite, prove you are a Cathar. Transmission ended. Xylos was alone again, but the cave felt smaller, more constricting. He felt like the one in the trap. He looked at his map of the preserve, his movements tracked by his gauntlet's internal navigation system. He traced his own path over the last 4 rotations. Then he traced the likely path of the Terran. It wasn't a random flight. It was a deliberate, winding path. And when he highlighted his own movements, a horrifying pattern emerged. The Terran hadn't been fleeing from him. It had been leading him. Herding him, like a sheepdog herding a particularly stupid, 4-armed wolf. He was being guided in a slow, tightening spiral toward the northwestern quadrant of the moon. Xylos pulled up the geological survey of that region. It was marked in red, unstable. A network of geothermal vents, razor-sharp obsidian fields, and deep, camouflaged crevasses. A place where his size and strength would be a liability, not an asset. A place where a smaller, more agile creature could easily set a fatal trap. A place where a heavy, armored hunter could disappear without a trace. The seed of doubt had blossomed into a tree of pure, unadulterated terror. He was the quarry. He had been the quarry from the moment he selected the pathetic, soft-skinned creature from the database. The right was still happening, but he was on the wrong side of it. Xylos stood up, his body shaking. The hunter had to become the hunted to understand the prey. But he had been so thoroughly outmaneuvered that he was no longer sure he remembered how to be a hunter at all. He had to find Leo, not to capture him, not to kill him. He had to find him to ask a single, terrifying question. He stepped out of the cave and into the oppressive humidity of the jungle. The air no longer smelled of life and death. It smelled only of judgment. The jungle, once his ally, was now a labyrinth of perceived threats. Every rustle of a leaf was Leo setting a snare. Every shadow was Leo lying in ambush. The paranoia was a physical weight, pressing down on Xylos, making his movements clumsy and loud. He was no longer a silent hunter. He was a panicked beast, crashing through the undergrowth. He followed the trail, the invisible path Leo had laid for him, into the geothermal fields. The landscape changed dramatically. The lush, vibrant jungle gave way to cracked, barren earth stained with sulfurous yellow and rust-red deposits. Steam hissed from fissures in the ground, smelling of boiled minerals. Jagged spires of black obsidian, sharp as surgical scalpels, jutted from the earth like broken teeth. This was a land designed to kill the careless. Xylos moved with agonizing slowness, testing every footstep. He imagined Leo perched on one of the spires, watching him, a smug smile on his soft, fleshy face. He imagined a deadfall made not of logs, but of 1,000 obsidian shards. He imagined a pitfall that opened into a boiling geothermal vent. The Terran's mind, he now realized, was the most dangerous weapon in the known galaxy. He finally tracked the faint heat signature to the mouth of a cave, set low into the base of a steaming mesa. The entrance was partially obscured by a curtain of hanging, mineral-encrusted moss. It was a perfect defensive position. Only one way in with a clear field of fire. Xylos hesitated. Walking in there felt like the final move in a game he had lost before he'd even known he was playing. But he had to know. He deactivated the humming energy field around his claws, a gesture of surrender, and stepped through the mossy curtain. The interior of the cave was surprisingly dry and warm. A small, smokeless fire crackled cheerfully in the center, the heat generated by a small, self-contained thermal unit from the Terran's pack. Leo was sitting beside it, calmly turning a skewered, bulbous tuber over the heat. He didn't look up immediately. He waited until the tuber was cooked to his satisfaction, pulled it off the skewer, and took a bite. "Ah, perfect," he said, chewing thoughtfully. "A little nutty with a hint of brimstone. You want some? You look like you could use a good meal. You've been running around for days." Stood just inside the entrance, his massive frame filling the space. He didn't know what to say. His mandibles worked silently, trying to form words. Leo looked up at him, his expression not one of triumph but of mild pity. "Take a seat, or a squat, whatever's comfortable for you. You're tracking mud all over my floor." Slowly, stiffly, lowered himself to the ground, his joints groaning in protest. He felt small. What are you?" Xylos finally managed to ask, his voice a hoarse rasp. Leo took another bite of the tuber. "Right now, I'm a guy enjoying a well-earned dinner. In a broader sense, my name is Leo. I'm a backpacker, sort of. And you are Xylos of the third clutch. You have a slight preference for sonic traps, but your heart isn't really in it. Your real talent lies in overly elaborate deadfalls. A for effort, C- for execution. The casual, accurate assessment was more disarming than any threat. "You knew," Xylos said. "You knew about the great hunt. You knew I would choose you." "Is a strong word," Leo said, wiping his mouth on the back of his hand. "Let's say I had a very strong, statistically backed suspicion. I read the Galactic Concordance's threat assessment on my own species. Class 4 prey. It's the funniest thing I've read in years. I figured sooner or later, some young, ambitious predator in training would see that entry and think, easy trophy. So I booked a trip to the most popular hunting preserve for Cathar coming-of-age rituals. And I waited. The question was all Xylos had left. A few reasons, Leo said, leaning back against his pack. Boredom was a big one. You see enough nebulas, they all start to look the same. But mostly it was a professional obligation. Professional obligation? Xylos repeated, confused. You are a backpacker, Leo chuckled. It was a low, genuine sound. That's what my tax forms say, for the last few years anyway. Before that, my job title was a bit different. I was a survival instructor for the Terran Coalition's Special Forces. Evasion, escape, and environmental warfare. My final thesis at the Academy was on non-lethal psychological incapacitation of superior hostiles. Stared at him. The pieces clicked into place with the sickening finality of a tomb door sealing shut. The constant talking, the mockery, the pranks, the feigned incompetence. Psychological operations, Xylos breathed. Bingo, Leo said, pointing at him with the half-eaten tuber. You can't outrun a Cathar, you can't outfight one. Your database is right about our physical stats. You're bigger, stronger, faster. But your entire predatory model is based on a simple, elegant equation. Predator instills fear in prey, prey panics, predator exploits panic. It's a beautiful system, but it has one critical vulnerability. Is it? Xylos asked, leaning forward, desperate for the answer. You don't know what to do when the prey refuses to be afraid, Leo said softly. You don't know what to do when the prey finds you annoying. All your instincts, all your training, it all short circuits. You become confused, frustrated, paranoid. You start making mistakes. You abandon your strengths and try to match your opponent's game. And that's when you lose. A heavy silence filled the cave, broken only by the crackle of the heating unit. So, Xylos said, his voice barely a whisper. This whole time you were hunting me. Considered this for a long moment. He looked at the hulking, defeated creature before him. He saw the shattered confidence, the dawning terror, the complete unraveling of a worldview. Hunting, he said finally. No, hunting is your word, it implies a kill. I wasn't here to kill you, Xylos. This wasn't an assassination. It was an audit, a field test. Think of it as a very aggressive educational seminar. Thesis. The fundamental misclassification of Homo sapiens by the Galactic Concordance and its potential impact on predator-class species. I think I've gathered enough data to make my point, don't you? Xylos looked at his own powerful, four-clawed hands. They were designed for tearing, for killing, for taking trophies. Now they just trembled. He had come here to become a hunter, to claim his place at the top of the food chain. Instead, he had been systematically, patiently, and comically dismantled by a soft-skinned prey animal who thought the whole process was a bit of a laugh. He had a choice. He could lunge across the fire, try to salvage some shred of his pride in a final, bloody confrontation. He knew with absolute certainty that he would die. The Terran was faster and more prepared than he looked. Or he could accept the lesson. Slowly, deliberately, Xylos reached down to his gauntlet. With a click, he deactivated the power core. A small light on the casing blinked from red to black. The great hunt was officially over. He had failed. Leo nodded, a flicker of something that might have been respect in his eyes. Good choice. He stood up and kicked dirt over the heating unit, extinguishing it. A piece of free advice, he said, shouldering his pack. Go home, tell your elders to update their files, tell them to read the footnotes. Tell them the soft-skinned, bipedal apes from Sector 612 are not prey. We're just quiet. And the next backpacker they find might not be a retired instructor just looking to prove a point. The next one might be on active duty. Leo walked to the mouth of the cave and paused, looking back at the shattered Cathar. It was a pleasure not being hunted by you, Xylos of the third clutch, he said. And then he was gone, vanishing into the steaming, alien landscape as if he had never been there at all. Xylos returned to Cathar Prime not with a trophy, but with a data slate. His failure was immediate and public. He was stripped of his clutch honors, his name entered into the records of the unfulfilled. He became an object of pity and scorn. Younglings would point at him in the corridors of the Citadel. Elders would turn away, but he submitted his report. He included every detail. The audio logs of Leo's incessant commentary, the analysis of his own manipulated path through the preserve, the deep archive files on Terran history, and his own final, terrifying conclusion. Weeks later, in the highest chamber of the Cathar Citadel, the Council of Elders convened. It was a rare gathering, reserved for matters of species-level importance. Kalen stood before them, his old confidence shaken. "The report of Xylos of the Third Clutch is troubling," one elder rasped. "It is the ravings of a broken mind," another countered. The boy failed his right and concocted this fantasy to excuse his weakness. "But the data logs are genuine," Kalen said, his voice heavy. "The navigational data confirms the Terran guided his movements. The historical analysis of their homeworld, I have reviewed it myself. It is comprehensive." An attendant activated the central holographic display. It showed a star chart of the galaxy. A small, unremarkable arm of the spiral was highlighted. Sector 612. A tiny blue dot was labeled Sol. For a long time the elders stared at it, the silence in the chamber absolute. They were predators of unmatched renown, their empire built on the certainty of their place in the universe. And now, they were staring at a single, innocuous data point that threatened to burn their entire worldview to the ground. Finally, the eldest of the council, a being whose carapace was nearly white with age, spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a final verdict. "Reclassify the Terrans," he commanded. "Effective immediately. Move them from the prey index to the uncategorized sapience list. Flag them, caution. Observation required." He paused, his ancient eyes fixed on the blue dot. "And cancel all scheduled hunts in their approved travel zones. Forbid any Cathar from engaging a Terran for any reason until we understand what they are." The council members shifted, their mandibles clicking in a chorus of unease. They were hunters facing a creature they could not comprehend. And for the first time in their long, proud history, the Cathar felt a cold, unfamiliar sensation. It was not fear of a rival. It was the primal, instinctual dread of a prey species, realizing it has just been noticed by a predator it never knew existed.